Okay, we're back where we started. We started this thing about a few months ago, where once a month we would take a look at time. It's about time. And we're looking at this thing called time from the perspective of decades, perspective of 1 to 10 years, because every 1 to 10 years, the questions of the decade begin to change. When you're a baby and you're growing up as a youngster, the question is, do you like me? They know you love them. They want to know, do you like me? The second question for those who are in their teen years is, who am I? This is the 0 to 10s. This is the 11s to 20s. They want to know who they are. And the world would like to tell them who they are, but we have a powerful voice that we need to use. And then from the 21s to the 30s, we have this period of time where everybody's looking for a career and everybody's looking for somebody to do life with. And so we run off and we go to university, we get ourselves qualified during this time, all in that then to say, well, what am I going to do with my life and who am I going to do it with? It's a big time, big choices, people. Make sure you make a good choice when it comes to this decade. Now, I know these decades are generalizations. They're not specifically exactly that, but it's just a generalization. And then we have from the 31s to the 40s, we have that period of time where you're running around like a chicken without a head. It's like careers, it's like families, like responsibilities. I've got to pay the bills, I've got to meet the budget, and I've got to do all those sort of things. And if we don't go and get ourselves some help from other people around, then we could find ourselves running ourselves ragged. So that's the 31s to the 40s. It's a hectic period of time. And then we have the 41s to the 50s. This is the one that we looked at a rugby ball, and we said that at halftime, whenever there's a game, at halftime, the guys will retreat back into the shed, and they go there not to drink or just to have a relax. They go there to discuss the second half of their lives, of the game, in fact. We get to do that, certainly at that age where you're halfway to the end, and you need to reevaluate based upon, remember we said, the successes and failures of the first half of your life. You plan the second half, which is still great and needs to be planned for. Now, as I speak here, I almost feel like I'm one of those motivational speakers who stands up in front of the group and trying to inspire some kind of movement among people. And yet at the same time as me not apologizing for the principles that come with what we're talking about here, I also need to say to you, there's so much biblical content that I can throw into this scenario. So I hope as I try and combine these two sort of types of speaking together, that it will be a blessing to you today and will help you. Specifically for those who have still yet to get to this age group, and for those who are in these age groups already, you know what I'm talking about. So I want to see lots of nodding of heads. Okay, anyway, we're talking about this period of time, and the question of this generation over here is there more? Is there more to this life? Is there more than just making money? Is there more to than just finding consolidation in my family and in my business and in my life? Is there more to this than just comfort? Now, I know I'm talking to a broad spectrum of people here, and not everybody by the time they're 50s has hit the comfort zone. But that's okay, because there might be extensions that you need to keep moving in. But this is just a generalization. But when you get to this stage in your life, you'll be asking yourself the question, is there more? Now, here's an interesting thing, and I've done this before, not very successfully sometimes, but I want to share with you something that I've been shown. You've got 4 lines that you can draw here to run through all of those dots. Now, the first tendency, and I'm not going to speak too long because I think you know this, is to try and keep all these boxes together. And it's very difficult to do that. So what you have to do is, if you want to draw a line through each one of these dots without going through the same dot twice, then there is a way. But this is what you have to do. You've got to draw this line here. Aha! Got it. Okay. You will notice that in order to draw through each one of these dots without going through one twice, you have to step outside of the line. You have to go outside of the box to be able to make this thing work. These are the areas I'm talking about here. Because up until now, your life has revolved around what's going on in the little box of your life. You've got boundaries around you. You've got walls around you. You've got responsibilities that have boxed you in. And this is one of the ploys of the world around it. They want you just to be in a box. They want to be able to control you. They want to be able to say, these are the boundaries that you need to have around your life. And the Bible is teaching us something completely differently. In fact, the Bible is using that phrase we sometimes talk about where it says that the blessing of God is on the other side of the lines. You know, when you go to school, you're judged according to when you color in a picture, about how well you stay inside the lines. When you color outside the line, the teacher will say, no, my boy, you've got to color inside the line to make sure that this picture is really nice and neat. I want to tell you, people, that might be true as of coloring pictures, but it's very miserable in coloring life because there's so much outside of the box that you've put around you that God would say, this is where the journey now needs to go. Last week, we spoke about significance and success, and we said that in order to get to be significant, you've got to sacrifice your success. So I'm going to tell you, what do you need to sacrifice this for? We understand the concept of sacrifice in order to become significant. But what does it look like? Where do I go? What do I do? What do I sacrifice to? Listen carefully, because that's a journey outside of this box. So here we go. We're talking about these areas. Now, let me make sure that you really understand that this is biblical. But before I do that, I want to paint you a picture that C.S. Lewis painted a while back when he wrote the book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. You heard of that book? It's an excellent book, and it's profoundly impactful in its allegorical look at life. And it's the story of this bunch of kids who were taken into a place of safety during the war, and they're living in this beautiful big old house out in the States. And in this house, there is a wardrobe. And they see this big old wardrobe, but one day, one of the kids walks to this wardrobe and finds the discovery that there's life on the other side of the wardrobe. But in order to get into the other side there, you've got to walk through the door. You've got to walk through this door into a totally new world, a world that is exciting, a world that is so different, a world that is full of opportunities. And the changes that happen in these kids as their minds begin to expand to say there's more to life than just what I've experienced. And they find that this life is on the other side of the door. There's blessing on the other side of the line. And today I need to encourage you to find that to be the truth. This is the decade in which this is a priority for you to find. If you look in the Bible, you'll see how this is true. So often we see how there's blessing on the other side of the line. Moses came to the children of Israel and said, it's miserable in Egypt, but there is blessing. But in order for you to get the blessing, we have to cross the line that is the Jordan, that is the Red Sea. So he took them across the Red Sea on their journey toward the promised land. And when they get there, Moses goes and Joshua takes over. And the people are saying, Joshua, is there any more blessing? Is there anywhere else you want us to go? And God says to Joshua, yes, take them to the other side of the line that is the Jordan River. There's blessing, land flowing, milk and honey on the other side of the river. There's blessing on the other side of the line. Have a look at other biblical examples. You see Peter in the boat, and it's raging the storm. And he sees Jesus. He says, Jesus, I want to come to you in the midst of the storm. And Jesus says, well, come. But Peter, if you want to come to me, you've got to get out the boat, which means you've got to cross the line of security and supposed safety in the boat to get into an area which is vulnerable and it's frightening and it's scary. That's what that area looks like. You've never been there before. And so as Peter steps out the boat, he finds a whole new world of opportunity despite his ending failure. It was a great place to be. One day, Peter with his disciples, with all the other disciples, is fishing, and they fished on this one side of the boat all night long, caught nothing. Jesus arrives on the seashore, and he says to them, hey, guys, caught any fish? Nothing. He says, cast your nets on the other side. Jesus, we're fishermen. You're not a fisherman. We know how to fish, Jesus. We've been fishing all night, and we've caught nothing. Jesus, I don't care. Just throw your net on the other side of the boat. There's blessing there. There's always this other side of the line thing. Then you take it out of the realm of supposedly just spiritual, and you look at us as human beings. There's blessing on the other side of the line of a bad attitude. You know that. Sort out your attitude, people. There's blessing on the other side of that line. Even when you're facing death. Oh, we don't mean to be fearful of death. Why are we so scared of death? You know, on the other side of the line of death is a place we call heaven. You want to go there? If you want to get to that side of the line, you've got to go across the bar that is death in order to get there. There's blessing, enormous, immense, crazy blessing on the other side of the line that looks so dark and dingy. That's because you're looking at it from this side of the line. I could go on all day giving examples of that. There's so many biblical examples, but I don't want to stretch too far. So I just want to give you one example with one great story. And I want to read a portion of it to you right now. But it's a long story full of incredible details that I would encourage you to go away and read. It's the story of Elisha, a great man of God. Supernatural stuff was just rolled off his tongues and through his hands and through his words. But in chapter 6 of 2 Kings, he's faced with a crisis. He's in a city he's in the city and there's a famine. There's being sieged by the Arameans around, and everybody in the city is very, very sad. They're in crisis. They're so hungry that they are eating one another's kids. It's that bad. They see the king and they say to the king, "King, you got to help us." He says, "What can I do? It's not my fault. The reason that we're in poverty is because of Elisha the prophet. He's brought this bad luck to us. Now look at us. We need to kill him." So he sends his soldiers around to Elisha's house, and the soldiers want to drag him out and kill him. But Elisha smiles. He says, No, don't kill me yet. Give me a chance. Give me a chance. As much as there is no food in the place now, within a very short period of time, this place is going to have more food than you will ever be able to eat. And the king says, "Nah, that's never going to happen." Well, now we pick up the reading from chapter 7. I love this. This is so cool. Now there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. They said to each other, "Why stay here until we die? If we say we'll go into the city, the famine is there, and surely we will die. And if we stay here, we will die. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and let's just surrender. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, then we die." So it's like a pick your poison kind of a thing. At dusk, they got up and they went to the camp of the Arameans. When they reached the edge of the camp, not a man was there, for the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army, so that they said to one another, "Look, the king of Israel has hired the Hittites and Egyptian kings to attack us." So they got up and they fled in the dusk and abandoned their tents and their horses and their donkeys, and they left its camp as it was, and they ran for their lives. Now, the lepers didn't know anything about that. They didn't hear any noise. This is this. The men who had leprosy reached the edge of the camp and entered one of the tents. They ate and they drank, and they carried away silver and gold and clothes, and they went off and hid them. They returned and entered another tent and took some things from it and hid them also. But then a moment of sanity was restored, and they looked at one another and they said this. They said to each other, "We are not doing what is right. This is a day of good news, and we are keeping it to ourselves." These 4 lepers are faced with an incredible dilemma. What do you do with the blessing? What do you do with the blessing that has suddenly become yours? And they're saying, well, should we hoard it? Should we keep it? Should we bury it? Should we try and refrigerate the food? Should we just parade the fashion that we found? Should we just put all our silver and gold in a big hole, save it up for a rainy day? And then one of them looks at his 3 buddies and he says, "Hey, guys, we could do that. It would be legitimate to do that. After all we've been through now, we've hit the luck here. We could easily do that." But they said, "No, we are not doing what is right." And the key verse there is verse 9, where it says, as they said to one another, "We're not doing what is right. This is a day of good news, and we're keeping it to ourselves. You see, now they were faced with in-the-box kind of thinking. This is my stuff. We've earned this. This is legitimately ours. But then sanity prevailed, and they realized the good news. Now, you say, what are they going to do? But first of all, I want to make this point. You know, in the Christian world, we talk about sin. Maybe we don't talk about sin enough. But there's a sin of commission where I need to ask God to forgive me for the things that I have done, and the blood of Jesus washes away all of that sin. But then there are also sins of omission that have huge consequences. And this is the sin that these people are fighting with. It wasn't wrong what they were doing. It was legitimately their right. They had all that stuff. They had suffered. Now they got all this blessing. They could have done perfectly and never done a thing wrong. But it's not about not doing what is wrong. It's about doing what is right that was facing their challenge with these people. And it's about this that it exists in this particular space outside of the box of your life. Just go and do what's right, people. Just go and do what is right. And between the ages of 50 to 60, all of a sudden you're facing with these challenges of, do I hoard? Do I keep? Do I store it up for a rainy day? Or do I do what is right? So my job today is to tell you what is right. And the passage is very clear. The story illustrates it perfectly. First of all, these guys had some good news to tell. There's blessing over there. There's future. There's all the stuff that you will need. They had to tell the good news. Okay. Now, whenever I say good news, I think of the word that we use, the gospel. The gospel is good news. That you don't have to die and pay for your sins for the rest of eternity. No. The good news is Jesus has done that on your behalf. The good news is that when you come to Christ and receive forgiveness from Him, then eternity is yours and the blessing of God is yours on the other side of the light of death. That's the good news. And these people had good news to share with the people. And they realized they had a story to tell. So if you have a story to tell, and as I look across the congregation here, if I could see through these lights, I could tell you that every one of you has got stories. Everyone who's got you has got a story to tell about how you came to know Christ. If you haven't come to know Him, I pray that you will. Be a great story in your life. But you have stories that could be a blessing to so many people if you would just share your story. The next thing you got to do is share your stuff. You see, the story thing is one thing. When I think of the story, I think of the blind man in John chapter 9, where he's healed of his blindness. Jesus came and said, I'm going to heal you. I need you to go. And he went and he did what Jesus told him to do, and he was healed. He never saw Jesus. He was blind. And when the Pharisees and the people around came to him and said, hey, aren't you the blind man that used to sit over there? He said, yep, that's me. And they said, well, heck, you can see. Have you been conning us all this time? He said, no. They said, tell us your story. First they went to his parents and the people and said, is he your son? Is he the blind one? I said, yep, it is. They said to him, well, what happened? They said, we don't know. Go and ask him. And all his answer was this. He said, when they were asked him what happened, he said, I don't know. All I know is once I was blind, but now I see. That's a great story to tell. Once I was blind, but now I see. Power of that story to change people's lives. The power of that story to have an influence in the community around. I'm sure we don't read about it, but it must have been incredible. Just simply the power of I once was blind, but now I see. So many of you have stories like that. See, the blindness is your old life. I once was blind and I walked around in this miserable situation, but then one day I met Jesus and now I can see. I can see. And some of you have incidences in your life that say to the same thing. I once was blind, but now I see. Please, people, the first thing you have to do when you're understanding what's on the other side of life, you just got to tell your story. Second thing these guys were faced with, now they had to share their stuff. They're lepers. They're asked the question, why should we? That's a good question. They didn't have to. It's a legitimate question. Why should we share with them? All this time, they've rejected us and thrown us the chicken bones over the wall. They've laughed at us. They've mocked us. They've called us names. We've been living with a sense of rejection. Nobody touches us. We haven't seen our families. We have been badly treated, and we are the victims of gross injustice. Why on earth should we now share with them? Well, the answer is simply, sharing with them is good for you, and it's just the right thing to do. You say, is that it? That's it. It's just the right thing to do. But the dilemma they faced was twofold. First one was they'd been through terrible suffering. They'd been through incredible rejection. They had suffered hopelessness at the highest level, so much so that they were just waiting to die. In fact, they weren't just waiting, they were wanting to die. These men had suicidal thoughts on their minds. And I'm just reminded of how great ministries start. They generally start out of a broken heart. They generally start out of a bad situation. Have a look around you, and you'll see so many great organizations, great ministries, great missions have started because of somebody's circumstance that they went through, that they have been through. They asked all the questions, why, and if only, and what if. They can't answer those questions, so they say, well, those are the old questions. The new question that I have for answer is, what now? I can't answer the what if question. I can't answer, well, what should I have done? I can't answer those questions, but I can answer the what now question. And I'm going to take that which was once for evil, and Satan had prepared that for me, and I'm going to turn it into good. And I'm going to help people who are going through the same thing as me. How many ministries have started just like that? I just think of, as I watch the Genesis thing, every time I see a Genesis minute, I feel really moved. You know, Genesis started one morning, I hope it was 5 in the morning. I was called to the hospital, and I watched a kid with AIDS die. Yeah, it was terrible. It was awful. I stood at the bedside of this young man, and I watched him die of HIV. I was praying like anything, shouting at the devil, saying, Lord, heal him. God didn't heal him, and he died. So I came back to Helene, and I told her the story. She then, in her wisdom, says, you need to tell the story to other people. And there are some people sitting here today who I told the story to. And they said, hey, we need to do something about this. And they got behind this little movement, and now you have what you saw on the screen just now. The beauty of a ministry that is impacting so many people. Where did it start? It started out of the brokenness of watching one kid die of AIDS. You got a story? Tell your story. Tell your story to people who care. Tell your story to those who you would want to minister to by way of an experience that you have been through. And who knows, in the hands of God, that story could become, it could just become an epidemic of good. If you'll just tell your story. Physical stories, healing. Some people need it. We're just praying for Ma at the moment. This lady is amazing, and we need to really continue to pray for her. What about emotional stories? People who've been in depression. I didn't understand depression until 6 months ago. I always thought, just get over yourself. Just pull yourself together until I got it. I soon realized, heck, this is real. I couldn't answer it. No amount of willpower could help me get over it. And I share that story now with other people. I say, Trevor, you don't look like you're going to be depressed for 5 minutes. Well, let me tell you, that was true until it hit me. As a story for me to be able to share. What about disappointment? Have we not all been through that? What about things like relational issues? Some of you who have come from poor situations at home, divorce and devastation at home. What about some of you businessmen who've been through circumstantial bankruptcy and all of the sadness that comes with the ups and downs of business life, and it just seems to be so big to you. If we could just see that it's not that big, let's hold lightly to the things that we have. The moment we get territorial, that's mine, and I own it. You're in trouble. You're in a way of misery. Have open hands on these things and share your story and share your stuff. What about failure? Some of the greatest things that we can teach others is through this thing we call failure. Here's the bottom line of this. Just don't waste a good crisis. Don't waste a good crisis by getting miserable about it too long. Don't waste a crisis by letting this shape the person that you are. If it ain't to the bad point, let it be something that will shape you to become even better. That's the external crisis. You can't control some of those things because that kind of stuff happens. But while that is happening, there's an internal crisis that is happening in your head. Why should I care? Am I my brother's keeper? Those are good questions that we should be asking. And these problems are that we live in a desensitized world where we're so in the box of our calloused lives and our calloused hearts and our calloused thinking. And we have this thing about indifference where, shame, I'm so sorry that you guys live like that. But as for me, Jack, I'm okay. It's indifference. Patch Adams, I love that movie, where he says that indifference is the greatest disease of the soul. Is your soul sick? Is your soul sick because of indifference, where you can look at the pain and suffering of somebody else and feel nothing for it? Well, you've got the disease, guys. And it's worse than corona and all those other things put together. It's the disease of indifference. Our eyes need to be opened to this thing. God himself, this is beautiful. Exodus chapter 3, God's heart is broken. He looks down from heaven and he sees the children of Israel. He sees that they're in a bad way. They're all slaves in Egypt. And so this is what he says to Moses. He says, Moses, I have seen the suffering of my people. I've heard their cry, and Moses, I am deeply concerned. I'm so concerned, Moses, that I am going to be coming down to do what I need to do amongst them. That's God speaking. You want to imitate God, you're going to do the same thing. When last did you see the suffering around you? People on the way home today, you're going to see a lot of suffering. I hope you see it. And not just desensitized to it, like we can so easily do. Have you heard the cry of kids, of abused wives and mothers? Have you heard the cry of the suffering of people at the injustice of people who abuse power? Have you heard their cry? And then ask the big question, are you concerned about it? You don't have to be. You don't have to be. But the right thing to be is to be concerned. And then the big question is, will you come down, like God said, I have seen, I have heard, I am concerned, and I am coming down. These are the crises that we face in our internal thinking. Now, if you're going to do this, there's a couple of things that you may need to do. I'm watching the clock. Okay, you may need to, if you want to step out of this line into these boxes, you may need to take the road less traveled. Not many people find this, you know that. Not many people break beyond the confines of the box. Not many people get across this line. Not many people do that. But it's the road less traveled. Jesus told us to expect that. He said there's a broad way, which many are on it, and there's a narrow way that only a few find. And as much as that relates to salvation, it relates to this as well. There's a broad way that most of the world are on there, and they're helter-skelter going from one place to the other. They're on a roller coaster that is so up and down, and they're not still enough for a moment to be able to get off. They're like on a roundabout, where the centrifugal force of the roundabout is keeping them on the roundabout of their life. And they would like to get off, but they can't get off because the forces are keeping them in there. They're just like that. They're like the roller coaster that goes up and down. It's never still for a moment, and you just can't get off. And this race of life has now become a rat race, and you're on the rat race until somebody looks at it and says, no, this is not normal. This might be normal if normal is determined by the majority, but that's not normal. It's determined by God for us as believers. We get so into comfort, even our defeat, we can be comfortable in. Children of Israel were in the wilderness for 40 years, very comfortable with their defeat. That when they were given the opportunity to go across the line to the land of promise, they didn't want to go. I think it's more comfortable here. We're so used to being defeated. We're so used to failure. Oh, Moses, we'll just live here. That's terrible. But these lepers had to take the road less traveled. I wouldn't have blamed them if they'd taken the other road, but they knew that they had to do what was right. You may need to, second of all, you may need to refuse the status quo. The status quo that exists in this box, and we spend a lot of energy just keeping the status quo. Don't rattle it. Don't change it. Don't tell me something that will change my mind about something. Just leave me the way that I am. Nehemiah faced this because it's a tactic of Satan. The story of Nehemiah is an incredible story. He comes from Persia to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And he calls the people in Jerusalem. He says, guys, it's time to rebuild the walls. They get together, they start rebuilding the walls. And then Satan does what he always does. He says, let's negotiate this. Nehemiah, you're making too many waves here. Nehemiah, you're ruffling our feathers, man. Nehemiah, you make us feel really uncomfortable. Do you really, Nehemiah, have to be so radical? Just calm down, man. Just calm down and we can just take this thing slowly. Nehemiah refused to stick with the status quo. And in 52 days, God supernaturally rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem with Nehemiah using his plan. But the first point of conflict is just calm down. Don't be so radical. People, the world is never changed by average people. Radical people change the world. Look at through history. The radicalness of people's thinking. And we're all saying, don't be so radical. Calm down. You make us feel bad. Oh, how I pray for a rising of good, focused, godly, radical people. 2 Corinthians 10, verse 5. So we must be careful of vain imaginings. But I'm not doing a vain imagining when I'm thinking about imagining a church that lives like this. A church that responds with urgency, because that's one of the other things you're going to have to do. You need to respond with a sense of urgency. You know, there's a little thing in the story of David and Goliath that catches my attention. I love it so much. When all the nation of Israel were hiding in the hills trying to keep away from this raging giant, they were hiding there until the 16-year-old kid comes with a catapult. He says, I'm going to kill the giant. And they laughed at him. Said, you're not equipped for that. You'll never be able to do that. And then as Goliath comes roaring out, he sees David and he's saying, who do you think you are? What am I, a dog that you would come to me with a stick and a stone? Who do you think I am? And he's chasing, he's coming out there and he's after David. He says, I'm going to give your head to, I'm going to do all sorts of mean stuff to you. That's what he's saying. And it says this, instead of running to the hills away from Goliath, it says, and David ran to face Goliath with a sense of urgency, to say this big old giant has to go down. He's blasphemed the name of my God. He must go down, and the sooner the better. And with a great sense of urgency, he attacked the giant. That's radical. But I love it, don't you? You're going to have to respond to what you're thinking today with a real sense of urgency. Whenever I think of a church like the church in Acts chapter 2, they were a radical church. They shared their stories about Jesus, first century church. They met together, meetings like this, and they tell stories. They'll tell us about Jesus, about this and that. They had no Bible to preach from. They just had stories to tell. The power of their stories to encourage them, to shape them, the next generation, the people around them. And then it says this, they did the strangest thing. They shared with everybody, so that everybody in the church had no lack for anything. And I'm thinking, what kind of spiritual change is this? That people who had held so tightly to my stuff now began to let loose. Began to share with those around. Man, I hope we could do the same. And you're all looking at me saying, Trevor, that's not normal. If normal is determined by the majority, you're right, it's not normal. But normal is not determined by the majority. This is normal Christian living. It's normal to think like this. Next year, we're going to be following up on this. I was just chatting to Jeff this morning, and what we're going to do is we're going to finish the series, get through the year, and we're going to come back to this. And one Sunday, we're going to host you to a ministry and mission fair, where everything that we do in this church will be exposed to you. And there's so much. There's so much. There's something for everybody. whether it be just some of the beautiful things of pouring tea, helping the car guards, helping in the garden, mentoring somebody, visiting somebody who's sick. Just do something. Just do something. A lot of people are attracted to a bigger church because they can hide. Well, no hiding next year, people. Sorry. If that's why you're here, then we're going to be challenging you next year to find just one thing that you can do in light of what we have said today. Something that will lead you outside of the box of your conforming lifestyle and make a difference for the kingdom. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope you are too. But I have one last simple thought here. The story ends like this. The good news got into the city, and the people were excited. They were so excited that they stampeded out of the city to go and see if what was being told by the lepers was true. And they were in such a frantic, desperate need that they stampeded out of the thing. And the king, Benadad himself, was standing in the city gate trying to hold everybody back, trying to say, no, don't go. Just stay where you are. And you know what they did? They trampled him in the city gate and left him for dead. Now, I think about what Jesus said, or what God said in the Garden of Eden, where he says there will come a day when someone will come, Satan, who will tramp on your head and you will bruise his heel. And I think about that in this context. The victory was theirs. The king lost. He was just like Satan. And one day in the spirit realm, should we begin to live like this, we're standing on the head of Satan. And the beautiful thing is, the victory is ours. Come, let's pray. Lord, we realize today that there's so much at stake. And I pray, Lord, today that we would take what I've spoken about in simple terms and just embed it into our hearts. That we begin to see people as you see people, incredibly valuable. That it would push us outside of the box of our conforming lifestyles, the box of our comfort, to make a difference in the world around us. By using some of the personal experiences that we have been through in order to turn those things that we thought were made for bad for us and for evil and turn them into good and be able to use them to serve other people. By saying to people, I have a story to tell you. I remember being in that situation as well. Let me tell you this. And just that story alone can be so helpful. And then, Lord, in this materialistic world, we just hold on to all that stuff. It's all going to burn one day anyway. But we need that stuff. We need that stuff to make it a blessing to other people and to grow your kingdom. We're not giving you anything that belongs to us. It all belongs to you anyway. And we acknowledge that. Thanks for this church. Man, I love these people. They're awesome. Thank you that we were on a journey to being even more awesome for your kingdom. We have an Acts 2 church in mind. And I know that was historically for that period of time, but it doesn't mean you can't do it again if we will just step across the line to be a blessing on the other side. Lord, as much as we've relegated this to the age group 50s to 60s, it applies across the board. But even more so for those who are entering retirement, for those who have been retired off, because in the corporate world today, everybody's looking for a young leader. And so some of the beautiful older, more experienced people are being pushed aside. Oh, Lord, I'm excited about that because they can now offer their abilities and their knowledge to a greater cause, to the cause of your kingdom. Help them as they do that. In Jesus' name. Amen.